So before we get to the Mongols, we're just going to go ahead and run through Eurasia at the dawn of the 13th century, just kind of sum up where we're at so far. The Korean peninsula was still unified underneath the Goryeo dynasty. In 1225, the Ly dynasty in Vietnam was overthrown by the Trần dynasty. As the Vietnamese have been doing for a couple centuries at this point, the Trần dynasty continued to expand along the coast, taking land away from the kingdom of Champa. And as they did, they continued to Sinicize their population. In West Asia, the Abbasids had been overrun by the Seljuk Turks in the 11th century. And as you might remember, those Seljuk Turks took the Abbasids under their protection. In other words, they allowed them to continue on as the religious heads of the Islamic Ummah, but it was the Seljuks who were calling all the shots. But by the beginning of the 13th century, the Seljuk Empire was losing its cohesion, and the Abbasids were able to reestablish some of their influence, particularly in Iraq. To the east and to the west of that old Seljuk Empire, the Turks were still very successful. The Sultanates of Delhi controlled most of the Indo-Gangetic plain, and the rest of South Asia was controlled mostly by Hindu kingdoms. You might remember the Chola dynasty, which was briefly mentioned a couple weeks ago. Persia and Afghanistan were ruled over by the Khwarezm Empire. We haven't mentioned them before, but they will be coming up in the podcast you'll be listening to, so you just need to know where they're at. And over in Anatolia, the Byzantine Empire was almost completely pushed out. The Turkish Sultanate of Rome was continually gaining ground. And it should be noted that the legacy of Rome wasn't gone. The Byzantines still saw themselves as Romans, and the Sultanate of Rome took its name from them. Europe was still a backwater. Ever since the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century CE, Europe had been ruled over by warlords. Some cities in the south had some autonomy, but most people lived underneath the thumbs of kings, dukes, and counts. Throughout the medieval period, the Byzantine Empire was the most stable Christian state, and as it faltered, Catholic and Orthodox Christianity were in an increasingly precarious position. Though there were some signs that the Catholic Christians, people living in the central and western portion of Europe, there were some signs that they were starting to gain some steam. By the 13th century, they had taken most of Iberia from the Caliphate of Cordoba, and some of the Mediterranean city-states of Venice and Genoa were getting rich off of trade with the Islamic states across the Mediterranean Sea. Throughout Asia, though, Nestorian Christianity, that Church of the East, was doing just fine as a religion of merchants and small communities, much like Judaism. But Genghis Khan, or you might know him as Genghis Khan, is going to radically change this picture.